Kong. My father was working for YK Powell. Well, my original recollection of him was working for YK Powell, and who has since become Sir YK Powell of the Worldwide Shipping Corporation. And when I remember my father was in charge of, I think, cargo and keeping the ships stocked or something. He had something to do with that. And he joined the shipping company at a rather early stage, and then since then it has gotten to be bigger than Onassis. And my mother was an English teacher, and then somewhere in the 50s, I think when I was like 7 years old or 6 years old, she got a scholarship to go to London to earn her whatever degree. So she went to study in London, and then she came back and continued her English teaching career. My mother's. Do you want to know everything?
Mm-hmm.
Like, my mother's from Shanghai, born in Shanghai and raised in Shanghai, and my father's born in Hong Kong, and in the 40s he went to Shanghai, and that's where they met, and where they got, and they were both working for the American consulate in Shanghai, and that's how they met.
Mm-hmm.
And they got married on Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving, because that was the only stretch of time that they had off, for a few days off.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when they got married, and also it was easy to remember. And then when the revolution came in 1949, they were evacuated. My mother's family and the whole family and them were evacuated by the Americans. I think my mother came by military aircraft, and my father came by a military ship or something.
Mm-hmm.
And they all ended up in Hong Kong because that's where my father's family was,
Mm-hmm.
and took up residence
Were they
there.
supporters of Chiang Kai-shek, or
I don't
they
know if they
were
were.
apolitical, or?
I think they were just a matter of. I don't think they were supporters of Chiang Kai-shek. I think it was just a matter of running away from something that was not, they didn't know. They
Mm-hmm.
were, it was like fear of the unknown more than anything else. They were not particularly anti-communist or anything, but as a
Mm-hmm.
matter of fact, my father is like, just loves China now. He keeps going back there every year, and he just, he says that it's the place that he feels most at home and at ease at.
Mm-hmm.
It's in China. And so they took up residence in Hong Kong late 1949, and then I was born in 1950 in Hong Kong. I went to this school, which was a grant in. There are different schools, like public schools, and then there are private schools, and then there are grant and aid schools, which are basically religious-oriented schools.
Mm-hmm.
And the first school that I went to was a Protestant school, and I went there until, it's the British schooling system, so I went there until primary 5, and then I switched to this Catholic school because it's a better school, and they've got better curriculum and better teachers and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Except it's run by these LaSalle brothers, and they were like really crazy, totally sadistic gang of brothers, and they used to whip students with,
Sounds like a British school.
right, bamboo canes and stuff like that. And also I heard rumors that they were all locked up during the Japanese occupation
Mm-hmm.
of Hong Kong during the Second World War, so they just went totally bananas
Mm-hmm.
after they were locked up. I remember there was one brother that used to whip kids in the class, and then until the only way he would stop is that if you cried. And as soon as you cry, he'd drop everything and run to the chapel by himself and repent, and then like just leave the class to total chaos for like 15, 20 minutes, and he'll come back and as if nothing has happened and start again. So that was the school that I went to. It's called St. Joseph's College, and I started there in primary 6, and then, well, from um, primary school to secondary school, you have to pass this exam, which is citywide, and everyone who wants to go into secondary school has to take this exam.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on how well you score on this exam, you get accepted in either the school that you're still going to, or you can better yourself and get into a better school if you get high marks, and if you get lower marks, you flunk out into public school.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you don't get any marks at all, then if you don't fail completely, then you don't get into secondary school at all. So that was like a big stress thing. It's like immediately you're put into this whole competition, stressful situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going to the library at City Hall to do research, and I was walking along, and all of a sudden I heard this really loud thudding noise, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And then all of a sudden I see all these people running. And so I ran with them, and I went to look, and there was this primary school student who had flunked the secondary school entrance exam and threw himself out of the 9th floor window of the city hall and committed suicide and killed himself. So that was like the first time that I actually realized that people kill themselves over these things.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't believe it. I thought, how weird.
Were you a competitive student? Were you?
No, I was a horrible student actually. I just like I really didn't care how I scored. All the pressure came from family to score better, but I really couldn't care less.
What about brothers and sisters? Do you have any?
No, I have brothers and sisters. I have a younger sister and I have a younger brother. My younger sister is living in New York. She's 3 years younger, and my younger brother is 11 years younger.
Mm-hmm.
There was no rivalry between my sister and me because she went to a girls' school and I went to a boys' school, and she went to the same school that my mother taught at.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever rivalry, I remember we used to have big fights at home, but that was about it. Pretty violent ones too.
About school?
No, about usual stupid thing like this is my chair, don't take it. That's my pomegranate. We at first, before we moved into our apartment, we were living at my grandmother's house. My grandfather had built this big house for my grandmother and his family,
Mm-hmm.
and in the backyard of this house were pomegranate trees, banana trees, and guava trees, and papaya trees. And we used to have a gardener and things like that and all that stuff. And I remember that our cousins lived in the same house too. It's a big house, and my cousins used to live there. My aunts, my uncles, and then part of the house was rented out. And but before the guava would be ripe, we'd climb the tree and put little name tags on the guava, and this is mine, and this is this is his, and this is yours, and whatever. And just put a little tag and wait for them to grow and ripen, and then we'd go and get them. Of course, we never got them because as soon as they ripe, the birds come and eat them, and you have to pick them before they're ripe. But before they're ripe, they were very hard, and we used to just pick them. But instead of eating them, we'd just throw them down the terrace, like from the terrace, throw them down in the
Mm-hmm.
street, and try to hit cars, convertible cars,
Mm-hmm.
like try to hit the people in the convertibles.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big pastime.
So you were budding JD, juvenile delinquent, or?
Kind of. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I used to be a terror around the house. I mean, just like do all kinds of things. And then when our family got to be, bigger and all that stuff. Oh yes, and we also had a really crazy aunt that lived in the house. She had 22 cats living with her in this one big room. And she was an opera singer before she went crazy. I mean, she was like certified crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And my uncle married her in China when she was still a famous opera singer, Chinese opera singer. And then she went crazy and she had to give up her career. And then, so they put her with my grandmother in the house. And she used to wander around the garden with her 22 cats and sing opera
Mm-hmm.
and wander around the hallways of the house and sing opera.
This is Chinese opera?
Yeah, Chinese opera, Cantonese opera.
Mm-hmm.
And her cats used to get into fights with snakes that comes out after the rain. That was really exciting too. I used to really like watching that, like a snake and two cats, and of course the snake would be torn to pieces. But then
Mm-hmm.
after the cat has been bitten, and then the cats would die too, and so it's like real
Poisonous
excitement.
snakes.
Yeah, like little poisonous green
Mm-hmm.
little poisonous snakes about this big. They would come down from the bushes. Because the house was built on the side of the hill,
Mm-hmm.
and at that time it wasn't that developed. Now it's like houses everywhere. I think my grandma's house has been torn down actually, but now it's all developed. At that time it was like wild bushes behind, so it was all these snakes would come out and wild cats and all that stuff. And also my grandmother used to catch wild cats and eat the brains because she thinks that gives you intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And but I never ate them. But I
Mm-hmm.
used to watch her kill them, which is really really funny. She gets a big pan of hot water and boil it, and
Mm-hmm.
then just put a plastic bag over the cat's head, and then
Mm-hmm.
dunk the whole thing in, and like screaming cat, and just boil them to death. It's very weird.
And how would she open the head up then?
And just like chop it off and crack it open, skin it. That's the
I
only part
knew
you eat.
people ate monkey brains. I didn't know about cat brains.
Well, monkey brains was eaten raw. I've never eaten it. My father claims that he's eaten it, but um, it used to be common practice in Hong Kong because Hong Kong was before. You see, when the British first took over Hong Kong, before Hong Kong was actually a city, it was just full of monkeys because that's the region where monkeys
Mm-hmm.
live. And but since monkey brain was in such demand, they just ate all the monkeys
Mm-hmm.
in Hong Kong. They just like completely ate the entire population, and this was like shortly after the British took over, and then the British started building, so they just killed off the rest of the population really
Mm-hmm.
fast. So there's no wildlife anymore in Hong Kong, none whatsoever, because it's totally developed now. The only wildlife they have is mosquitoes.
Did you have any favorite subjects in school? Was there
Um,
anything that appealed to you?
no, but I did have. There was no art at the time. I didn't have any art. The only art that I did at that time was Chinese painting. I didn't have any favorite subjects in school, but the only thing that I hated most was physical education. And that was the thing that I tried my best to avoid. But there's nothing you can avoid. I mean, it's not like school systems in America.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot have a little slip and then skip class. You're there. I mean, and you have to do all that and stuff like that. But my mother decided that I was going to take up Chinese painting. So um, I was sent to this, I don't even remember his name. I should look it up, but this guy who's a pretty, he's a pretty well known Chinese artist in Hong Kong, and he was like a descendant of a disciple of of
Mm-hmm.
the school of painting, which is considered, it's a southern school, it's a Cantonese school of painting,
Mm-hmm.
but it's considered very elegant and things like that. So I was to become a Chinese painter, and so I went there twice a week. I would walk from our house to this guy's house, sit down and take out all my brushes and everything, and he would sit here and I would sit there, and he would do one stroke and I have to copy the stroke exactly, but exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first subject was bamboo, and then it went on to branches with flowers and leaves, and I had to learn like all the different ways of painting a leaf, doing a leaf. You have to do the entire leaf in less than 2 strokes. Like no, 3 strokes was the minimum. One side, just the other side, and then the tip of the leaf. And then all the different possibilities of veins on the leaf. How does a vein grow? But of course, it's realistic, but also it's abstracted at the same time. It's like really weird because he would take us out to do these sketches, like hyper-realistic sketches of leaves and flowers and birds and trees and branches in the botanical gardens, and then we would go back to the to the to his studio, and then we would start painting, and I couldn't understand how it could get from this really realistic sketch to this like three brush stroke, and I thought to myself, I said, well, if it could go from this to this, in fact, I can do anything. I mean, why does I have to do the stroke exactly the same way as he does? So I started rebelling, and I wouldn't paint the way he does, and I get yelled at and get my knuckles, beaten and things like that. So I figured, well, the best thing to do is just to follow exactly what he does, and then when I go home, I can do whatever I want. And so after the birds and the bees and the trees and all that, we started on rocks and bigger trees and little bonsai scenes, like with little human figures and water and fog and all that stuff. And then I got really tired of that. By the time we got to the peacocks, I just couldn't stand it anymore. It was driving me crazy because first of all, the peacocks, you have to grind mineral colors. I mean, I love them now, but at the time it was just a pain in the ass to me. I didn't want to do all these things. I was forced to do this, and we went out. I remember we went out and bought all these beautiful mineral colors. It's like the blue, the most incredible blue and things like that. So I used to have to grind all these colors up and then do this hyper-realistic peacock thing, like feather by feather. And then just lay down the bottom, and then you put the mineral color on top, and then you put some other color on top, and then after it's drying and all that stuff. And at that time, I was just going crazy. So I told my mother I didn't want to do this anymore, and she just freaked out because after all this expensive brushes and like sable brushes and tiger toothbrushes or whatever, and all these rice paper that you buy by the yard and things like that. So she said, well, maybe you should change subjects. So she got me this other um, um, teacher that specializes in horses, because I was really into horses at that time. I wanted to ride horses and like, do all kinds of things with horses. So I went to this other teacher and started painting these horses, and you have to do a horse with less than 16 strokes. And so that was kind of fun at the beginning, and I would do wilder and wilder horses, and then it got into the point where they didn't look like horses anymore. They were just like beasts running around. And of course that didn't go over very well. And then this horse teacher also knew how to mount Chinese paintings into scrolls. Like you do the silk backing, and then you do the silk on top, and you put the thing on the end, and you get these horns and you put them on the end, and then you roll it up, and it becomes a scroll, and it's like really beautiful. And I'd give an arm to remember how to do that right now. I mean, I still have a vague idea, but I can't remember how to do it really well. I mean, I can do all kinds of things right now with that. Maybe I should do that again when I go back to Hong Kong. Take that up again. But so I got into doing that, and for a while, and then by that time, and then all of a sudden, I was told that, all of a sudden, my mother took me running around Hong Kong, buying all these underwear and underclothes and socks and really thick clothes, and I couldn't understand why. And I said, what is going on, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden they just popped this on me and said, oh, well, you're going to Canada for school. And I said, oh, yeah? Well, after you graduate from high school, it's no future for you in Hong Kong, so you better go to Canada for school. And they were arranging, all this time they were arranging for me to go to Saskatchewan, this
they know people there for you to stay with, or how did they pick
No, it's the same LaSalle Brothers that has a university in Saskatchewan. And at that time, Canada was like booming, so they figured that it's a good place for me to go. And since I was going to St. Joseph's College, which was a LaSalle Brother thing, it would be easy for me to, go from that to this other school in Saskatoon, because then they would I would go with a recommendation and all that stuff, and it would be very easy for me to get there. And so all of a sudden they were preparing for me to go live in Saskatoon. And I thought, Saskatoon, and I looked in the map, and I wasn't very happy about that, because it was like nowhere.
Where is it?
It's the capital of Saskatchewan.
Which is the center, or is
Which is like, it's the equivalent of the Midwest, right? It's the Midwest and straight up, and it's like 6 months is covered in snow, and the other 6 months is just wheat fields. I mean, there's nothing there, absolutely nothing. And already, and I mean, I got used to Hong Kong. I mean, Hong Kong is a very cosmopolitan city. We used to go and have baked Alaska for desserts, and this and that, and we used to go out and eat all kinds of food and stuff like that. So I mean, it's not, I was a sophisticated child. I mean, my taste buds were already developed and all that stuff, and I wasn't about to go to Saskatchewan. So I was like pissed off about that, but then, so I was creating a nuisance. I didn't want to go. I don't want to go. I want to go to the States. And so, because my cousin was going to San Francisco to study, so I said, I want to go to San Francisco. I want to go to Saskatchewan. So, but they were set on going there and blah, 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 and all that stuff. And then at that time, it started getting shaky in Hong Kong because of the Red Guards and all that stuff. So my parents decided, finally, this was like 2 years before I was supposed to leave for Canada, all of a sudden decided that they wanted to get out of Hong Kong too, because of this whole Red Guard business. And they applied for immigration, and they got it. So 2 years later, instead of going to Saskatchewan by myself, the whole family was going to Canada now. And all of a sudden, all these clothes that I had labeled and everything didn't have to be sent to Saskatchewan. I was very happy about that, and I was very happy that the whole family was going instead of just me. So we were going to go to Vancouver. So Vancouver, okay. And I looked at the map, and it's on the west coast, and it's not that far from San Francisco. I mean, I heard about San Francisco. I wanted to go to San Francisco real bad. So
what
I
year
thought,
was this?
this was in 1965, 64, 65. 64, I remember. The Beatles was like really big. They came to play in Hong Kong, and I went to see the Beatles, and I thought I was the only boy in the entire theater. It was like everybody was a girl.
Was it a stadium show, or was it?
No, it was a theater show. It was it was a cinema. Cinemas in Hong Kong are huge, gigantic. I mean, they're really, really big, like Times Square used to be, because people just go to movies all the time, and to go to movies is really hard. You have to buy tickets in advance, 3 or 4 days in advance, and if it's a big hit, you have to buy them a month in advance. Specific show, every seat is reserved, and they have like different prices. If you sit in the front, it's really cheap, or if you sit way back in the back, it's a little bit more expensive, and the middle section is the most expensive. Things like that. It's really weird. So this theater, the cinema, and that's where the Beatles were playing, and I went there, and I remember the thing that hit me most. Well, I couldn't see the Beatles for nothing because I was like really short and I was way back there. But the thing that impressed me most was that all these girls were wearing these stiletto heels, like really sharp heels, and they were all standing on the theater chairs, like screaming and jumping up and down. And afterwards, all the chairs were gutted, completely gutted, like it's just like all these stuffing were coming out of the chair, and I thought that was really funny. And oh right, so back to going to Vancouver. So we got on the, airplane, and it was a DC-8 stretch, I remember, and we just flew, like it was the longest flight I've ever taken, and we just flew to Vancouver. And then when we landed in Vancouver, got off the plane, and was and I thought it was really weird. I remember exactly what I was wearing. I was wearing this shark skin suit. It was gray, shiny, um, very 60s, kind of. And I was getting off the plane, and I was like all ready for this, like, Canada, snazzy place, right? So I got all dressed up before I got on the plane. And I got off the plane, and there was like a shack. The airport was like one building shack. I thought, my God, what is this? And I looked around, and I couldn't see a tall building. I couldn't see nothing. It was like everything was like tiny little houses, tiny little houses, and and the new airport in Vancouver was being built, and it was a cement building. But the old airport where we got off was just corrugated tin, or like real nondescript airport. And there were only like two planes parked there. Um, you know, Meanwhile, when we left Hong Kong, it was like Pan Am, TWA, BOAC. I mean, it's just like all kinds of big airplanes, and like, it was a huge airport, and people were just buzzing here and there and everything. And I got there, and it's like nothing going on. And we were picked up by these friends of my parents, and we were driven, like, a sightseeing tour around, driven around, and we were driven to this botanical garden called Queen Elizabeth Garden, and we drove up to this little hill on top, and there was all these really pretty flowers and green, and the air was like fresh and really crisp, and I thought, this smells great, and it's like all these flowers. I haven't seen so many flowers, and all these flowers look so different. It's not like they're not tropical flowers. They all look, temperate flowers, and I'm used to tropical flowers, and no palm trees, all these pine trees, and everything looked really weird. And then on top of this hill, they said, and there's downtown. They pointed over there, and I looked over there, and there was like two big buildings, and one of them was Vancouver Hotel with a copper roof, and there was one other high rise, and the Vancouver Hotel was built in the 20s or 30s and something like that, and it's like, a neo-Gothic structure. I looked over and said, that's downtown? Yes, that's downtown. I said, what does downtown mean? And because in Hong Kong there's no downtown, the entire city is a city, period. I mean, it's like Manhattan. There's no, Manhattan is downtown, uptown, midtown, but where is the center? Everywhere is the center, right? Um, but in Vancouver, downtown is the center, and everything else is like, little nice houses with their lawns and things like that. Uh, but the mountains are incredible. I mean, snow-capped mountains. It's the first time I've ever seen that in my whole life. I've never seen that before, and it was like really stunning. And the physical setup of the place was really quite stunning. But I couldn't believe like downtown was so tiny, and I thought this was like a big city before I came. So I looked at my parents and was kind of okay. So we went back. So we went back in the car, and we're driven to this hotel downtown, right on the beach in West End, and so that's where we stayed for 2 weeks before we moved into our house, which was a nice suburban home with a lawn and all that stuff. Uh, and that was the beginning of my Canadian era. And then and then we had to go to school, go to what they called, what was it called, high school, right? So I went into last year high school, no, second to last year high school. I did 2 years high school in Canada. And I couldn't believe how slack it was. It was just amazing. You walk in, like, you can skip classes if you want, and immediately the thing that really hit me was art class. For once, I had art class in school. It was like a regular curriculum, and this teacher I had was really great. He just let me do anything I want. And so I was like showing off my Chinese painting and all that stuff. And he said, "Oh, that's wonderful. Now, can you do this in gouache?" And so I was trying to like bend these brushes and things like that. Of course, it won't bend. I mean, these straight, across brushes and things like that. So I had to adapt and do all kinds of other things. And I discovered abstract painting, and I was doing abstract painting in oil and stuff like that. And so I still hated physical education. So what I did was I just skipped all my phys ed classes and got slips to go to art studio and did art things. Physics was okay because I get to play with these electronic things, and although I keep short-circuiting them and they just keep blowing up. Chemistry was not good at all. Biology was kind of fun because I got to cut up things. And all these things like I did not have in Hong Kong because it was like play thing to me. It was like play. And in Hong Kong you do sociology, you do civics, and you do history, and you do, English grammar, English lit, and all these things. I mean, you don't do these things in high school. Nobody takes civics in high school here. So I thought it was just a joke. It was just a gas, and I didn't have to do anything. I was getting like top marks. After studying in Hong Kong, where you have to study for like 16, 4 hours a night, and all that stuff, it was just a breeze. And then I learned to drive. That was like the beginning of all hell breaking loose because I used to sneak out of the house and drive all over the place. And then also I was getting into Jefferson Airplane and Quicksilver Messenger and what else? Oh, and by that time, my father was working for CP Air, Canadian Pacific Airways. And so we had these tickets that we could fly anywhere we want. So I used to go to San Francisco every other weekend. It used to cost me like $16 return to go to San Francisco from Vancouver. And so I just get on the plane, I'll just go there and visit my cousin. And
What did you look like at this period?
at this period, I was like still wearing my shark skin suit and everything. But once I started going to San Francisco, I started changing. Once I started getting into Quicksilver and all, and Jefferson Airplane and Led Zeppelin and all these bands and Creedence Clearwater, I started changing. I started changing into a hippie. I started letting my hair grow, and started wearing these. No, I went from shark skin to mod, and then from mod to hippie. During my mod period, I had ringlets. I permed my hair and I had these ringlets, and I was wearing these lime green see-through shirts with big collars down to here, like really long, and big puffy sleeves with 8 buttons, like the cuffs, 8 buttons here, big puffy sleeves and see-through. And on top I wore a vest, paisley vest, kind of like satiny kind of thing, and fringe jackets.
Where'd you find these clothes, in Vancouver?
Yeah, in Vancouver you can buy them. In Gastown. That was like a big in place. It was like Hayden Ashbury, the equivalent of Hayden Ashbury. And so I buy all these clothes, and my mother was just having heart attacks because all these fabulous clothes she bought me in Hong Kong, very very chic, from Lane Crawford and Harrods and all that stuff, and I would not wear. I just refused to wear them. I'd go out and buy these bell-bottom jeans with big stripes on them, and she's always been like so tasteful about it all. And so that was when I was having a lot of problems at home. I was like having fights with my parents constantly. I want to go out all the time. I want to stay out all night. I started taking I started smoking pot. This was in 1967. I started smoking pot, and then one thing. Oh yes, and then at this time I was in UBC. I went into UBC, University of British Columbia, as a physics major for 1 year, and then I gave that up, and then I switched to fine arts major.
Why physics?
To please my parents, because like they wanted me to be a engineer or something like that, and so of all the things in those branches, physics was the one that attracted me most at the time. But I went in as a physics, and I just blew up about $10,000 worth of equipment in the lab or something, and almost killed myself. Actually, I got a huge electric shock.
You trying to make a bomb, or?
No, I was trying to hook up these electrodes and cathode ray tubes or whatever. I mean, whatever things, and it's just like trying to do all these things, and I'm just not good at it. I mean, theory I can deal with, but when it actually comes to physically, you know, hooking up these things, I mean, what do I know from a male female plug? I mean, positive, negative, and you just plug anything into any hole and just go and smoke comes out, and that would be the end of it. So I flunked that and I switched to fine arts major, right? And of course, like, university at that time was a laugh. I mean, Allen Ginsberg, I remember him coming to UBC in 1968 and took over the faculty club and, lit joints with dollar bills and all that stuff. It was like major upheaval time in university. I mean, nobody was taking any courses seriously. Everybody was just as an excuse, I mean, to pass the time, right? So that's what I was doing. And during the summer, um, um, to the insistence of my parents, I had to take the summer job, which I really didn't want to take. And I was working on this boat that I had to live on the boat. It was like a kind of like a cruise ferry boat type of thing that cruised around um, the the Howe Sound. That's what it's called. The place between Vancouver Island and the mainland. And so, and there were all these kids working there as well from university, and I have to live there for 16 days and then get 4 days off in a row. So out of boredom and nothing to do, I started taking acid, like with these kids, and I used to have such a great time. I'd take acid and then go to work. I was in charge of making. One year I was in charge of making salads, and one year I was in charge of making eggs in the morning. And making salad, I used to forget what orders I have to do, and I would trip out on the tomato, and it's like, oh, it's so beautiful. It's like peeling lettuce, and oh, it's so beautiful. And it's like, forget about the salad. It's just used to, take half an hour arranging one salad, and it's like, it's really wild. Um, I mean, oh, we gotta get out of this place by the animal was our theme song, and we play that full blast in the kitchen and things like that. And and then I was going to San Francisco. I keep going to San Francisco and hanging around Hayden Ashbury, Fisherman's Wharf, and where else? Oh, I used to go to all these gay bars on Market Street. And I remember dancing under this gigantic parachute that was all tie-dyed and with lights, these blob lights on it and everything, and on a cement floor, and I thought that was so cool. And I was going out to gay bars too, without anybody knowing this, in Vancouver. I used to take my father's car and drive and stay out all night and take acid. And one time I remember I was going home in the morning and I was really stoned on acid and I really didn't want to go home. But I had to bring the car back because my father was going to go to work and he had to take the car. So I had to bring the car back, and I got back and I dropped the car off in the garage and I walked into the house for 5 minutes and I looked around, really tripping. I looked around and I said, I can't stay here. And I went back out and I got on the road and I hitchhiked and got on the back of this motorcycle and just rode, and this guy picked me up and we just rode around like all morning until my acid wore off before I went home. So that was the beginning of that period.
Did the guy know that you were tripping, or he just thought you wanted to kill some time, or?
Well, no, we went to have sex in the bushes. That's what we did. But I don't think he knew I was tripping. Maybe I told him, I don't remember. But I remember I got, like this, I was hitchhiking and this guy drove by on a motorcycle and I got on the back of the motorcycle and it felt so great. While you're tripping and you're like going really fast. That felt really, really good. And I guess I did tell him I was tripping or something. But I didn't get home until like around noon. And my mother was like completely in a frenzy. Didn't know where I was. She didn't even. I mean, she continued teaching, but she didn't go to school that day because I wasn't home. So I got hell for it. That didn't stop me. So this went on, and I used to hang out with all these drag queens because they were the most fun.
Was this a totally separate existence you had to keep away from your parents?
Oh, of course. I mean, they don't know anything. But I got really brazen. Like, after a while, I got really brazen, and all these drag queens and these studs and oh right, I started hanging around these gay clubs in Vancouver, and then I met all these drag queens, and then they started taking because I used to stay out all night. I can't stay in the clubs all night because they close at 4 o'clock or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to go to these drag queens' houses were kind of apartments were kind of a refuge for me to go until whatever drugs I take and I have one off or
Mm-hmm.
just to pass the night. I used to get involved in all this whole scene and all that stuff, and they used to have these studs around, and they always have the best drugs, and they're always really entertaining because they have like either big fights or have really wild parties.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just watch all these things, and then when they have big fights, like sometimes this one drag queen called Tanya got thrown out of her apartment, and she didn't have any place to go and all that stuff, and she was with this guy and all that stuff. So I got really brazen one night, and I said, well, why don't you come and I'll sneak you into the house, and then we can all sleep in the basement,
Mm-hmm.
and then the next day, you can leave after everybody's gone to work, you can leave quietly. Little did I know, my mother came down to the basement, walked into the basement, and there I was sleeping with this drag queen and this stud, and she just let out this big scream, holler, and kicked us all out of the house. So I didn't go home for a few days after that, and then that was when it was getting really bad. So I decided, well, I better leave home. I better go someplace else instead of just creating too much problems.
Mm-hmm.
So, as an excuse of going to school in Montreal, so I applied to this school, Sir George William University, which has since then changed to Concordia University. So I applied to the school and I got accepted, and I said, I'm moving there. And I told them I want to learn French. I'm moving there. Um, Seems to be more happening there. And since my mother has a brother who lives in Montreal for years and years and years, like
Mm-hmm.
a long time, she felt it was safe for me to go there. At least it's like relatives or something. So she let me go, and I went there. Um, no, actually, she didn't let me go there. She felt that it was safe for me to go there, but she didn't want me to go until I graduated from UBC. But I wasn't going to wait around for another year and a half. I was just like, I've had it in
Mm-hmm.
Vancouver. I couldn't stand it anymore. This dual existence, where I have to,
Right.
stay out and
Right.
keep it
Had
all
you
from
had
all
you
that stuff.
confronted your parents at all about it at this point, or talked to them, or what was their reaction? Or I mean, after she finds you in the basement with a drag queen, she certainly realizes what's happening. I mean,
Well, they think it's all a phase that I was going to grow,
mm-hmm.
pass through. Like, I was going to grow out of. And actually, my father said something really funny. He says, "Go get a haircut, and you feel, and you see, go get a haircut, and you change." And this time I heard that here. I mean, it's like, go get a haircut, and you change. And I said, "Oh, come on, Dad, it's not that simple." I said. So that's when I said, "Listen, I think I know I'm gay. I don't know when I mean, I was also going out with, nice Chinese girls,
Mm-hmm.
and I also have a different circle of friends, which is like all these all these Chinese friends that I have
Mm-hmm.
from university. They're all studying to be lawyers, doctors, whatever, and all these princesses, wealthy princesses from Hong Kong that have
Mm-hmm.
moved to Vancouver, and so I have this whole other circle, and then I have this whole other circle of drag queen friends, and then I have this other circle of like kind of normal gay friends who are like school teachers and designers and this and that. So I have basically these three circles of friends that don't meet each other, and so I told my parents, about my sexual orientation, about what I really want to do, and at that time I wanted to be a fashion designer. So it keep getting worse and worse, and I keep getting into these huge fights. Not so much with my mother at this point. I don't think my mother and me were talking very much anymore. But it was between my father and me. I was getting these huge fights, and that was very depressing to me because my father and I used to get along really really well, but I was having these big fights with him over this thing. So I thought the best thing for me to do was leave. So after one big fight, I just decided I was going to leave, and I just left. Without the acceptance from Concordia University, I figured that I'll just go there. And also at this time, I met this I met this boy that I was kind of in love with, and he moved back to Montreal. He's from Montreal. I moved back to Montreal, so I figured, well, I'll go and stay with him,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, and that would be the end of that, and then I
Mm-hmm.
can do whatever I want. So I got there. So I left Vancouver. I packed up my things, and I went to Montreal, and I stayed with this boy for a while, and then I got accepted at Concordia University, but I didn't feel like going to school at that time, so I didn't go there. And for the first year in Montreal, I took a job. I found a job as a designer, as a clothing designer, except I was designing for Skidoo suits. I was designing Skidoo suits for this company,
Mm-hmm.
Skidoo, which is like the biggest company, Bombardier.
Mm-hmm.
And Skidoo is a trademark. Like it's everybody calls snowmobile Skidoos now because they were the first one to come out with it. And they call it Skidoo.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a trademark. So I was doing. So I got this job to design Skidoo suits, and um, and the guy who hired me, Mr. Walker, he was really really nice. Um, he used to let me do anything I want. Like I had no background whatsoever in fashion designing. I
Mm-hmm.
was just doing little sketches,
Mm-hmm.
and he liked my little sketches, but they were so wild. What happened was, I finally found out what he did was that he would take my little wild sketches and then give it to the production manager, and the production manager would just throw this out, throw that out, throw this feature out, throw that feature out, and just sort of like slim it down to
Mm-hmm.
something functional
Mm-hmm.
that they can actually make. But the styling was all coming from these wild sketches.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they were happy that I was doing this, and I was happy that I was doing this, and I was actually getting paid. It was my actual first, job, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak. I thought it was good, and I got my own little apartment and everything, and I thought I was doing really well. And then after the first year, towards the end of the first year, um, they sent me to Frankfurt to a ski show, to a ski wear show. Um, to look at what ski clothes were doing, and I was supposed to copy ski clothes and
Mm-hmm.
change that into ski-doo clothes. And that was my first time to Europe. And I arrived in Frankfurt. Was it Frankfurt or Munich? No, Munich. Sorry, it wasn't Frankfurt. It was Munich. Right, Frankfurt was like the actual skis and ski boots, and then Munich was the ski fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to the ski fashion show, and I had such a great time. I was like running around Munich, and it was like complete eye opener. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
to be in Europe and all these old buildings and this and that and all that stuff.
What
And
year was this?
this is 1970, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 1970. And also at this time, by this time, I had met um, this boy from this guy from Paris, and he was working in Canada for Shell Canada. He was hired. He's a helicopter pilot, and he was hired by um, Shell Canada to do exploration in the north, and to fly these helicopters to
Mm-hmm.
do survey work. And so he came to Montreal, and I met him. Forgot where. But I met him, and then we had this wild affair while he was in Montreal for like 3 months or something, 2 3 months, and then he moved back to Paris. And when I went to Munich, um, when I finished all that stuff that I had to do in Munich, I told my boss that I was going to stay a little bit longer and go to Paris to go and visit Francois. So I thought, oh wow, great, going to Paris. So I got into this train and went to Paris, and that I even liked Paris more. I mean, Munich was okay.
Mm-hmm.
Munich was fun, and then I got to Paris, and I thought, this is even more fun.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to Paris, and Francois took me around on his motorcycle, and we were like tripping all over the place on this motorcycle, and he took me on a helicopter and all that stuff, and it was really wild, and I had a wild fling in Paris for a few days. And then I went back to Montreal, and from that moment on, I was just itching. I was just itching to move to Paris. I just could not stand Montreal anymore. So I went back, and that was I started plotting, how the hell am I going to get to Paris? So I started saving my money. I demanded raises and more raises so I can save more and more money. And at that time, I also at that time I had started going to school part time, and at Concordia doing fine arts, trying to finish my degree. And also that's just to please my parents, because by this time we were talking again on the telephone, but they never came to visit or anything like that. And so they said, well, if you go back to school, we'll send you some money. So I thought, okay, I'll go back to school, so I'll get some money, and then I can put away this money, and I can go to Paris, right? So, um, so I spent the next year, 19, the last half of 1970 to middle of 1971, saving money to move to Paris, and I was just like reading everything, all the French magazines, and trying to learn French. But I was having a really hard time in Montreal because number one, everybody speaks English in Montreal. And number two, they speak this French Canadian French, which I realized was not the French that you speak in Paris. So I was being really snobby about it, and I thought, well, I better learn French in France. Forget about this French; it's so tacky, blah blah blah, so on and so forth. And by this time, I've shed my hippie look, and and completely glamorized myself. And
Can we just backtrack for a second and talk
yeah.
about Andy Warhol and the whole pop scene in New York and whether you knew about that in
No, I didn't
1969,
know anything
1970,
about
or
that at
okay,
all. I
all right,
wasn't aware of that at
okay.
all. My whole sensibility was based on the West Coast. See, when I was on the West Coast, everything, the center, as far as the center was San Francisco,
Mm-hmm.
not even Los Angeles. I mean, I didn't care about Los Angeles. My whole sensibility is X towards San Francisco, the Janis Joplin, the Cockettes, and that whole
Mm-hmm.
semi-drag
Did you know the
hippie.
Cockettes? Did you go
I
to their
went to see
shows?
them. Yeah,
Yeah.
I went to see the Cockettes, and
Mm-hmm.
I went to see Janice at Fillmore,
Mm-hmm.
and afterwards I heard that Janice used to go to this bar on Grand Street in Chinatown to drink, and then she would go across the street to see the Cockettes, and then they would hang out together. So I used to go and hang out there, and
Mm-hmm.
in that whole scene.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my whole universe. I mean, the Doors and and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. I didn't know anything about New York. When I was in Montreal, I did go to New York a couple of times with my friend to visit because he used to come to New York to shop and things like that, and I used to come to New York with him a couple of times. But I hated it. I hated New York at that time. I didn't want to be here. It was like to me at that time. You see, after I finished after I finished with the West Coast, after I moved east, my whole sensibilities towards Europe.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't interested in New York. My whole thing was geared towards Paris. I wanted to be in Paris, and
Mm-hmm.
like I was, all my energy was channeled towards getting to Paris and
Mm-hmm.
trying to find out what's going on in Europe. Uh, um, my first impression of New York was that I came here and it was just like so cold and so impersonal and so dirty and so filthy, and it's just and and this was the beginning of like the 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 clones, I guess, what became to be known as the clones. The whole gay scene in New
Mm-hmm.
York was the beginning of that whole Christopher scene,
Mm-hmm.
Christopher Street scene, and I was frightened by that because it was too much too fast, and I was frightened by it.
Mm-hmm.
It just people were like really snotty. It wasn't like San Francisco, It wasn't like peace, love, and brotherhood and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. People were very much into class structure and snobbishness and all
Mm-hmm.
that stuff. So I wasn't into New York at all, and I wasn't even aware of Warhol. I was aware of who Warhol was, but I wasn't interested in what he was doing at that time. But that whole scene with Edie and all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't aware of at all.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you where I became aware of that. It was in Paris
Okay,
that I
well,
became aware of that.
let's pick up where we were then.
Right. And so all my energy was going to Paris, blah, blah, blah. And so finally I made the move. without telling my parents or anything. I just went in the summer. I packed up everything. I sold everything in Montreal, and I just packed up and I went. And I applied to this art. After I got there, again, I moved because of this guy that I knew, like hoping to continue this relationship after I get there. Of course, after you get there, it's a different matter. And it didn't last that long, but that was like, at least a footing for me. As soon as I arrived there, I wasn't arriving cold. And then I was trying to figure out what I was going to do in Paris. What is going to justify my staying in Paris? Because after I got there, I really loved it. I didn't want to leave.
Mm-hmm.
So I applied to this art school called l'École Supérieure d'Art Graphique.
Can I keep a copy of this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, and so I applied to that school, and um, they said, come in for an interview. And I didn't speak any French at that time. So I went into for the interview, and then I told them, I showed them that I have I've done all this university, I've done, my fine arts, I've got a BFA, and I've got this and that, and I want to go in and study art, but I want to go in on an advanced level. And they said, well, show me your portfolio. I said, portfolio? Nobody's ever asked me for a portfolio before. And I said, okay. So I ran home and I pulled these drawings and a few things here and a few things there, and I pulled it all together. And I went in and showed them like pitiful 7 pieces of art, and
What was this from that you showed them?
just that I've done from Concordia and from UBC, my
Mm-hmm.
my fine art years,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I showed them these like sketches and drawings and things like that. And I showed them a couple of Chinese painting things and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And they took one look at it and says, "I'm afraid you're gonna have to start in the first year." I thought, oh my god, what am I gonna do? Blah blah blah. And I said, well, how long is it gonna be? Blah blah blah. And I said, we will accept you, but only in first year. But you can come in at half, because the half a year has already gone by. They said,
Mm-hmm.
but you can come in and finish half the first year, and then just do, the next 2 years, and do and do the advanced stuff. And so I said, but I was really happy they accepted me, because now I have a perfect legit excuse to stay in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
So I immediately sent a telegram to my father and said, look, I've been accepted in this fabulous art school, blah 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 blah. It is the best school in one of the best schools in Europe, and so on and so forth. And I said, um, the only catch is it costs $3,000 a year, and I don't have any money and I can't get a job. But I'm accepted. And so he sent a telegram back and said, well, think about it, but we really want you to be in graduate school in, in Canada. And I wrote back a letter and says, no way, I'm not going back to Canada. I love it in Paris. I'm going to stay here. I'm not going anywhere. And so after a few letters back and forth, they finally agreed that I was going to go to this school. I was going to go to this school full time, no more futzing around like in Montreal. And they would pay for my tuition and give me a living allowance.